Hi everyone and welcome to this self-knowledge course. Today we will be studying the topic return and recurrence. Particularly, this is a very interesting conference because it will allow us to answer some questions that perhaps we have asked ourselves at some point of our lives. For example, we will understand today what causes a déjà vu. What is that of feeling that we have already experienced something before? When something happens to us and we feel something inside that tells us that we have seen or experienced it before, like visiting a place for the first time and having a strong impression of having been there before, or meeting someone for the first time and feeling an immediate affinity and sense of having met that person before, or on the contrary, feeling an immediate aversion, a dislike for someone without even knowing them well. Today we're going to see, studying these two laws, what is the true cause of all this. We are also going to talk about the past lives, and we are also going to study how we can change our destiny. And to begin to understand all this, we are going to see how the laws of return and recurrence work, which are two of the 48 laws that govern this physical world, and we are going to learn, of course, how to transcend them. To begin, we are going to start by reflecting on this. A man is what his life is. If a man does not modify anything within himself, if he doesn't radically transform his life, if he doesn't work on himself, he's wasting his time miserably. If we are here at this moment listening to this conference, following this course, or looking for spirituality and consciousness awakening topics, it is because we have reached a point in our life where something internally demands that we make an interior change. Therefore, to start moving forward, to start waking up, we must generate an internal revolution that leads us to make radical changes in our lives. Otherwise, we will only be miserably wasting time as we have been doing existence after existence. Once we understand the need to start making a radical change within ourselves, it is necessary to begin to know what are the things that keep us tied to always acting in the same way and repeating the same life lessons over and over again without transcending them. So, let's start by studying what the law of return is. The word return comes from turning again. So, what this law teaches us is that everything rotates repeatedly. So, this is the law that mechanically keeps us dying and reburning lifetime after lifetime. We can see that life will, with all its times or moments, is a wheel. We are born, we grow up, we reproduce, we grow old, and then we die. And we believe that when we die, everything ends, but it turns out to be that it doesn't. It turns out to be that death is only the return to the starting point of life itself, with the possibility of repeating it again. As we explained in Conference 8, where we talked about evolution and involution in the wheel of samsara, we said that we have 3,000 cycles to achieve self-realization, or 3,000 turns on that wheel passing through the different kingdoms of nature, and upon reaching the human kingdom in each cycle, we are entitled to 108 lives as humans. And between one life and another, there is a return process. And let's see now how that process goes. Once our physical body dies, we go through a judgment process to weigh the actions carried out in the previous life, and with it measure the consequences that will be generated for the next life. And after that, we are going to wait in the limbo for the necessary conditions to be born again. So that those who will be our parents meet, fall in love, get married, or whatever the process that leads them to have a sexual relationship, in which they will gestate the physical body of a new child to which our spark will be connected to return to a new physical existence. But it is interesting to know that we usually continue in the seed of our offspring. We usually go back in the same family tree. For example, the grandmother who died a few years ago is the little niece who was born recently. If the person has not yet exhausted their 108 lives as human in that cycle, their spark continues reburning into their family's offsprings. And even after having exhausted their 108 existences as humans, without having done the necessary work to awaken the consciousness, they will continue to return as they are going through the different kingdoms of nature in the same family. So if that grandmother who died a few years ago didn't have more existences as a human, she will return home as a pet, for example, a puppy or a kitten, who usually have very human attitudes. If we do a conscious astral unfolding and investigate who that pet was when it was human, we will discover with surprise the veracity of what we are affirming here. With the technique of astral unfolding, which we teach in conference number 3, we can also check if there really are successive or past lives. We can also ask our being to show us which one of the 108 existences we are currently in, to show us also one of our past lives, or to show us the trial process that occurs between one life and another, and if we have the merits, we will come to see it and verify that the law of return is a reality. But it is important to know that return is not the same as reincarnation, as many people believe. These concepts are often confused with each other, but the return is what we do when we die and are born again, driven by a mechanical law, because our consciousness is asleep. Therefore, we do not have the ability to decide how, where, or under what conditions to be born. Reincarnating, on the contrary, is a voluntary process experienced by beings who have already awakened consciousness, who have worked on themselves, achieving a great internal advance, so that at the moment of death they are aware of the process. They are aware of having left the physical body and can decide in which family, when, and in what conditions to be born in order to continue their process of spiritual development. Okay, so now let's look at the law of recurrence. This is the law by which everything is mechanically repeated over and over again. In this physical manifestation, things happen and cyclically happen again, because we are subjected by this law. The life of each one of us, with all its moments, is always the same, repeating itself from existence to existence through the innumerable centuries. The life of each one of us in particular is a living movie that, when we die, we take with us to the eternity. Each one takes his film and brings it back to project it again on the screen of a new existence. Each one of the situations that arise in our life are the different scenes of our film. We believe that we manage our life, that we make decisions, and we don't realize how we simply repeat the same actions, the same mistakes, the same circumstances, life after life. We have been visiting the same places, meeting the same souls, going through the same situations, only aggravated by the consequences of this. That's why we experience things that we are sure we've experienced before. Meeting people and already having an impression of those people without having treated them enough. And that is what we call deja vu, or even what we call premonition. We have the feeling that we have experienced this before, or that we know what is going to happen. It is only because we have been experiencing that same situation with those same souls so many times that we have it engraved, in the memory of our waters, although we do not remember it with our mind. When we come to understand and verify this, we realize that our destiny is already written, that nothing that happens to us happens by mere chance. We believe that we fall in love with someone just because we decided so, and we do not realize that under our reasoning, a series of things moved, which led us to meet again and get together with that person to repeat the different circumstances that we have been living with that person, one life after another. The repetition of dramas, comedies, and tragedies is a fundamental axiom of the law of recurrence. In every new existence, the same circumstances are always repeated, and the actors of such scenes, always repeated, are those people who live within us, the defects, the I's, or the egos. If we disintegrate those actors, those defects that originate the always repeated scenes of our life, then the repetition of such circumstances would become more than impossible. Obviously, without actors, there can be no scenes. And it's very important that we reflect on it, since understanding this will shed light on how we can begin to modify our lives. Many people live inside us. We have the illusion of being one, but we only begin to observe ourselves to realize that psychologically we are many different people, and each one has their own way of thinking, feeling, and acting. We see that at one point we are happy, optimistic, courageous, and we think that everything will be fine. And at another time, we see ourselves sad, depressed, discouraged, and thinking that everything will go wrong and that nothing is worth it. At another time, we are an angry person who can only think of attacking or taking revenge. And at another time, and depending on the circumstance, a lustful self will manifest through us that will only seek sexual satisfaction. We are not a conscious individual. We are a bunch of psychological defects, a bunch of different ways of being that arise in us, depending on the circumstances that are presented to us, leading us to repeat the same dramas, the same tragedies, the same comedies, etc., life after life. It is important to begin to observe and understand this, because only by disintegrating each one of our ways of being will we free ourselves from all our recurrences and from each one of the commitments that these defects have acquired with other people throughout our different existences. Reflecting seriously on the law of recurrence or repetition of scenes in each return, we discover through intimate self-observation the secret springs of this issue. If in the past life, at the age of 25, we had an affair, undoubtedly, the defect of such a commitment will look for that person 25 years into the new existence. If the other person was only 15 or 20 years old, the defect of such an adventure will look for his beloved one in the new existence at the same age. It is clear to understand that the two defects, both his and hers, seek each other telepathically and meet again to repeat the same love affair of the past existence. Two enemies, for example, who fought to death in the past existence, will look for each other again in the new existence to repeat their tragedy at the corresponding age. So, as we can see, people's psychological defects are telepathically dated to repeat the same recurrence. Suddenly, we may have a desire to change the route or visit such a place or talk to such a person, and similar things move within the other person. And we do not realize how are the psychological defects leading us to the meeting as it happened in the past life. Each one of our psychological defects has many commitments, and none of them will lead us to get out of this wheel, to awaken consciousness. On the contrary, they will seek to manage us through desire and through our mind. Life after life, we become simple puppets of our defects. We go through life dragged by circumstances, never denying ourselves to these desires, fatally fulfilling each one of these commitments and living in the illusion that we are the ones who run our lives. Within each one of us live many people, as I said before, full of commitments, who come to fulfill them. Our lustful defect created many lives ago bring their sexual commitments. Our treacherous defects bring their commitments too. Our violent, tyrannical, submissive defects, our vice defects have even marked in this existence the age at which they will begin to manifest and how many times they will. The serious thing about all this is that the intellect ignores the existence of such people or eyes or defects within itself and of such commitments that are fatally fulfilled. Our personality is only the instrument of different defects through which each one of those defects fulfills its commitments. We are miserable logs dragged by the raging waves in the sea of the existence. If life brings us sad situations, we cry. If it brings us happy situations, we laugh. If it brings us violent situations, we get angry. And if it brings us lustful situations, we get excited. But we never reflect. We never take control of our emotions, desires, thoughts, and actions. Getting out of this misfortune, this unconsciousness, the lamentable state in which we find ourselves is only possible by dying within oneself. If we really want to change our destiny, if we want our consciousness to direct every act of our existence, we have to disintegrate each one of those actors, each one of our wrong ways of being. So, now let's see how recurrences are gestated and how to work on them so that we begin to modify our destiny and begin to have a new conscious life focused on the awakening of our consciousness. The first thing will be to start by observing the psychological defects that are manifested to us through desire and that begin to communicate telepathically with the defects of other people. and make us begin to have, for example, a strong desire to look at a certain person, or to call a certain person, or to do such and such a thing. For example, we have our partner, and we have understood how important our partner is and how important fidelity is to achieve a spiritual birth. But it turns out that we have a recurrence of adultery, because our adulterous defect comes with that sexual commitment with another person from a past life. Then, for this adultery to take place, a telepathic communication begins to move between our lustful defects and those of that other person. Desires begin to move within us and within the other person too. A desire to flirt, or to talk to that person, or to look to that person, or to smile to that person. But we must observe also how our personality helps. The personality, that image that we have formed of ourselves in this life with its many concepts, and that we always feel the need to take care of what others will say, will always leads us to act in the precise and adequate way according to the circumstances, so that these defects can manifest themselves. Let's put some examples of recurrences to see how to work them. In the case of adultery, for example, the day of the recurrence arrives. When that person asks us, for example, for the favor to accompany him or her to his house or her house for something, our personality acts due to its concept that we cannot deny a favor to a person. Then we give in, and the recurrence ends up occurring. But it is that we already come with a psychological and emotional burden that if we do not observe it, we fall easily. The same could be said of a recurrence of a fight. We must observe the defects of displeasure and antipathy that begin to manifest in us and that are going to communicate telepathically with the other person so that this recurrence occurs. If we have in our personality, for example, the deep-rooted concept that we cannot allow ourselves to be humiliated by anyone, there our personality will be helping so that this recurrence occurs. These are facts that we are unaware of. Things happen to us, events that are processed in our subconscious and in our unconscious. We have the illusion of doing, but we do nothing consciously. These or things happen to us. This is a fatal and mechanical. But if we observe ourselves, we discover that desire that is manifested in us. We discover the concepts of personality that want to lead us to make a mistake. If we become reflective and we begin to observe all those things that would commonly pass below reason, and we deny those egoic desires, asking our Divine Mother, who is the love aspect of our consciousness, to disintegrate those desires, those obsessions, all the details that we observe in our mind, emotion, and sex. This is how we will free ourselves from continuing to mechanically fall into the recurrences of our ego. The three factors for the revolution of consciousness are the key to free ourselves from the ego, free our consciousness, and start acting freely and consciously. Psychological death will allow us to eliminate all those actors who are our negative ways of being, who by law of recurrence have to appear on the screen of our lives to lead us to continue making the same mistakes. In this way, we begin to free our consciousness. With spiritual birth, making wise use of our sexual energy, we begin to condense the released essence in our spinal column so that it cannot be trapped by the ego again. And with the sacrifice for humanity, we can pay the karmic debts that we have for the bad actions that our defects led us to commit and that got us into those recurrences. Doing this, working on ourselves, practicing the 3 factors, is how we truly free ourselves. When we disintegrate the different defects that keep us tied to the incessant repetition of circumstances and errors, we free ourselves from the law of recurrence. And by releasing and awakening all our consciousness, we free ourselves from the law of return, because we will no longer have to repeat this course, which is life, because we will already have achieved its purpose, which is to reach self-knowledge and reach total liberation. So, thank you very much for being here. This has been the topic of today. Remember that you can leave your questions and comments in the comment section and we will be answering them. So, let me invite you to the next topic that in which we will be studying the laws of karma and dharma. Okay, we will be learning everything about karma, the different types of karma, and how can we get to negotiate them. Okay, negotiate it. So, thank you very much, and until next time.